Greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the initial and first premiere installment of AMC Mail Bag. Now, this is not AMC Movie Talk. As you know, if you follow the show at all, we take mailbag questions at the end of every episode. But we get like between 100 and 200 emails from you guys a day, and we're only able and have time really to answer 3 to 5 mailbag questions on the show. So what we thought we would do is start a new show, and we're going to do this 2 or 3 times a week, called AMC Mailbag. And all we're going to do, as you can tell, this is a lot more casual. It's just me sitting at my desk, and we're going to just take your questions. We're just going to take mailbag questions. And I don't care if they're repetitive. I don't care if I go off on geek rants. I don't really care, because this isn't AMC Movie Talk. This is just AMC Mailbag, where we're just going to sit around, and you and I, we're just going to talk movies. So since this is kind of our pilot episode here on Friday, May 24th, I need you guys to not only comment on the topics, but I need you guys to tell us if you think this show is worth doing, because we're just testing this out. Jump into the comment section. Make sure you tell us if you think this is a show for us to continue doing, if it's worth it or not. So, with all of that out of the way, let's get started with the first question of the day. The first question today comes from Mario Ochoa. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Mario. And this is a question that has come in. I got about 40 of these today, talking about Quicksilver. We actually talked about this one on AMC Movie Talk, but it's worth talking about again. And Mario writes this. He says, "Hello, AMC Movie Talk. I've been watching you for months now. I don't know what I'd do without you." Well, Mario, we don't know what we'd do without you either. Bryan Singer just recently tweeted that he was planning on using Quicksilver in Days of Future Past. Does this change Joss Whedon's approach to Avengers 2? Do you think Fox heard what Joss was saying about using Quicksilver, and that's why they're using him? Love to hear your thoughts. Thanks a lot for the email, Mario. You are the very first email we're doing on AMC Mailbag. Here's the thing. No, I do not believe at all that Fox and Bryan Singer just suddenly heard that Joss Whedon and Marvel was planning on using Quicksilver, and therefore they just said at the last second, let's use Quicksilver too. Because X-Men Days of Future Past is already in production. I mean, they're already shooting this movie. They already have every minute of the next 5 months to the second planned out and detailed. It's what shooting schedules are. Anybody who's worked in the film industry, you know how this works. I believe they've known they were going to use Quicksilver, that Fox has known that they were going to use Quicksilver for months now, months and months and months. As a matter of fact, I also probably think Kevin Feige, the president of the production over at Marvel, I bet he knew as well that Fox was going to be using Quicksilver when they announced that they were going to use Quicksilver as well in Avengers 2. So, no, I don't think Fox just used him in spite of Marvel. I think they had this plan for a very long time. And remember, X-Men comes out before Avengers 2, I believe. But here's the question I have. I mean, I have a problem with this, and I have for a long time. I do not like the fact that Marvel is using Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. And it's not because I don't think they're good questions. And I mentioned this on our episode of AMC Movie Talk today. It's because the fact that Marvel is not allowed to even mention the fact that Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are mutants, and they're not even allowed to mention the fact, obviously, that they're Magneto's children. Well, these are two very key, essential parts of who Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch are. Those are really important facts about them. I'm not talking about hair color. I'm not talking about age. I'm not talking about what their costume looks like. I'm not talking about that they have maybe one extra power. I'm talking about a key, core, essential thing to who these people are. They're mutants, and they're Magneto's kids. And if you're not going to have those key, essential things in the movie, why use Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch? I mean, this is the part I have not understood this entire time. Look, Kevin Feige, you've got an amazing roster of Marvel characters sitting on the shelf. You've got Luke Cage, and you've got Doctor Strange, and you've got Black Panther, and you've got Wasp, and you've got a lot of these great characters. Why don't you use one of these? Why use a character that you know Fox is going to use, more appropriately use, as mutants and as Magneto's kids? Why not use other characters that you have on your roster that are dying to be on the big screen, that fans like me want to see on the big screen, like Luke Cage, like Black Panther, like Wasp, like Doctor Strange? Why not use these guys instead of using another character that another franchise is going to use and use the way they're supposed to be used, as mutants? it just is. This is a part of it I really don't understand, and it makes no sense to me. I wish they would change their mind. I wish they would do something else, but they're not. So personally, I love the fact that Bryan Singer is using Quicksilver, and we don't know if they're using Scarlet Witch or not. But I love the fact that they're using Quicksilver in X-Men Days of Future Past, and I'm disappointed still that Marvel is planning on using them, and I hope they change their minds about that. All right, our next question today comes from Trent Miller, and Trent Miller writes this. In anticipation for Man of Steel, I'm thinking about watching some or all of the previous Superman movies. I'm interested to know what John and guest think of these movies and if it's worth watching all of them. I have not seen the third and fourth films. Also, which cut of Superman 2 do you guys prefer, the theatrical cut or the Richard Donner cut? I actually think I'm in the minority here. I think I actually prefer the theatrical cut of Superman 2. I know a lot of people prefer the director's cut of it, and for good reason. Just for me personally, I'm a fan of the theatrical cut. As far as which movies should you watch, well, obviously 1 and 2, but really, I would never try to discourage somebody from watching like Superman 3 and 4, 3, the one with Richard Pryor and the wacko kryptonite that gets Superman really spaced out and drugged out and wigging out. But I would never recommend them either. There's no need to watch Superman 3, and there's absolutely certainly no need to watch Superman 4. The Quest for Peace, I think it was called, the one with Nuclear Man, where Lex Luthor takes, I believe, a strand of Superman's hair and sends it into the sun, and that magically makes Nuclear Man one of maybe the worst conceived superhero villain on the big screen of all time. That's just nutty. That's just ridiculous. That those films are a complete waste of time. So, hey, if you're planning to sit down and watch Superman 3 and 4 just for kicks, go for it. But if you're asking me, hey, to get really ramped up for Man of Steel, should I watch Superman 3 and 4? Personally, I would say, nah, you don't need to bother. All right, the next question comes from Santos Gonzalez. And Santos Gonzalez writes, hey guys, I love the show. I've only recently come across it, but in less than 10 minutes into the first episode, it became an intent favorite with me. You guys say what I think. I have always wondered why they never did a reboot of the Highlander movies. I believe it would do great in the hands of the right studio and director, if they completely disregard the second movie, that is. My question is, what do you guys think of a reboot to the Highlander movies, and do you think there's a possibility of there being a reboot in the near future being developed? Thank you for your time. Well, as a matter of fact, they are doing a reboot of The Highlander, and it's already in pre-production, I believe. I haven't heard a lot of news on it lately, but it's actually going to star Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds is your new Connor McLeod. Now, I'm a big fan of Ryan Reynolds. I've always loved him as an actor, and The Highlander is one of my all-time favorite films, the original one. Highlander 2 is obviously one of the biggest bags of crap in the history of Hollywood, but the original is amazing. But I don't like the fit of Ryan Reynolds as the Highlander. But I mean, don't think for a second that is taking away my enthusiasm for going out to see it, because I'm going to be first in line to see the rebooted Highlander with Ryan Reynolds. I am. If you were to ask me in advance, if I was a studio head and you're asking me my opinion, do I think they should have Ryan Reynolds as, the new Highlander? I'm going to say no. Go with somebody else. But that's what's happening, and I'm glad it's happening. And let's just wait and see how Ryan Reynolds does in the role. All right, the next question comes from Jake Emmett. And Jake Emmett writes, hey, I was wondering, what do you think of a possibility of turning the Arrow TV series into a movie with the likes of Nightwing in it as well? I think they are going to bring Nightwing into the series anyway, with them mentioning Bloodhaven. What do you think? This is one of those questions that I have answered on AMC Movie Talk before. Look, I am actually a really big fan of the Arrow TV series. I'm a big fan of it. I didn't like the first 5 minutes of the pilot episode, and then I got completely hooked. I think this is a great show. They just had their series or their season finale last week, and I absolutely love the show. I think it's great. But I don't think they can make it into a movie. I think, and I've made this argument before, Arrow is on TV for free right now, and not a lot of people are watching it. Just a couple of million people. That is not a big enough audience. And that's with it being on TV for free. So if people want or would be interested in this incarnation of Arrow, they can watch it, and yet they're not watching it in big numbers. Just, losers like me, who I sit around home and watching this type of crap. I love this show. I really do. I wish more people would watch it. I also don't think. I mean, here's the other thing. You mentioned Nightwing. Let's say, for argument's sake, that they would kind of half planning on making an Arrow TV or movie based on the TV show and having the same cast move over and everything. Then it really becomes impossible for them to use Nightwing, because Nightwing is a part of the Batman universe, and there is no way they're going to mess with the Batman universe. Okay, because obviously, Nightwing was Robin, who is, of course, Dick Grayson, the original Robin. And you can't have Nightwing in Arrow, and then when they reboot Batman, they have to base the reboot on what Arrow is already doing. They're not going to want to put those types of handcuffs on themselves, because when they reboot Batman, they want no handcuffs. They don't want to have to adhere to anything else that's going on in the Warner Brothers and DC universe. They want to make their Batman film and then make the DC universe revolve around it. That's the way they're probably going to approach it. And I think doing an Arrow movie with Nightwing at that point becomes an absolute impossibility. Yeah, my ears peaked up too when I heard them mention Bloodhaven, because, that's a Nightwing thing. So maybe they'll have him in the show, and that's fine. But I think that just further kind of solidifies the fact that I don't believe they have any real plans to do any kind of an Arrow movie, at least not based on the TV show. So that's just kind of the way I see it. All right, the next email comes from Sujan Devkota. Hope I'm not butchering your name at all. And he writes, "Hey guys, I've got a question about John and mine's favorite, Supernatural. Do you guys think it should happen?" I'm assuming you're asking if I think they should do a Supernatural movie. Supernatural is my absolute favorite show on TV right now that Battlestar Galactica is off the air. Supernatural is my absolute favorite show on TV. I think it's brilliantly written. It's got a very Joss Whedon kind of feel to it, with the really snappy dialogue and humor mixed in with the serious stuff that's going on. And I've been just loving this show for years, but I can't be hypocritical. Even though it's my favorite TV show, I have to acknowledge it's not a ratings hit. There's not a lot of people that watch Supernatural. It's not in the top 50. So again, we have to ask the question. If people were going to be interested in watching Supernatural with this cast and this story, and it's on TV for free right now, and they're not watching it, then is now a good time to do a Supernatural movie? And obviously the answer to that question is no. It just doesn't make sense. Now, would I love it if they did a Supernatural movie? Absolutely, I would love it. I would lose my freaking mind. Yeah, I want a Supernatural movie. But just because of that reason, look, it's on TV for free right now and nobody's watching it. So why would they line up to go watch it in the theaters and pay money to go watch it? I don't think it makes much sense. So sadly for you and I, big fans of the show, I just don't see it happening. All right, the next question comes from Alexander Iverson. And Alexander asks, I've always been a huge fan of the Stargate franchise as well as the Firefly series. I was very sad to see Stargate Universe canceled because I liked the darker and somewhat more mature turn that it took. Do you think there is any possibility that there will be another Stargate series offshoot like how there was with SG-1, Atlantis, and then Universe? Do you think there will ever be a full-fledged Stargate movie like there was for Firefly with Serenity? Or do you think Stargate is dead and gone? Thank you for your input, Alex Iverson. Yeah, Alex, this is much like Supernatural. Stargate Universe I liked all the Stargate shows. I wasn't a massive fan of Stargate Universe, but I really did appreciate that they had a very different tone from all the other Stargates, and I kind of liked what they were doing. But much like Stargate and much like Arrow, this is kind of becoming the theme of today's show, Stargate Universe got canceled because nobody watched it. It sucks. It was a quality show. I don't know if it's because just people didn't like the show. Maybe other people didn't think it was a quality show, or if it's everybody just got fatigued of Stargate. Whatever the reason is, it got canceled because nobody was watching the show. And so the network, can't pay to have a TV show on if nobody's watching it. So once again, the question is raised. If nobody's watching it on TV, can you do a movie? Now, this is a little bit different though, because you don't necessarily have to do a Stargate Universe movie. You can do a Stargate SG-1 reboot. You can do a reboot of the original film. There's lots of different things. And let's face it, people love sci-fi flicks. There's a high recognition with the name Stargate. That's a high-profile brand name that people will recognize. So is it possible? I wouldn't say it's likely, but I'll go on board and say possible. I'll tell you right now, look, if I was the president of one of the studios right now and Stargate came across my desk, I would give it some thought. Because like we mentioned, I mean, definitely not Stargate Universe, but Stargate SG-1, it's been off the air for a long time now, and it had decent numbers, okay numbers, but everybody recognized the name, or just rebooting the movie, and it's a great story. Like, especially the story of the original. That's a really cool story that you could do. So I would consider it. I would say it's possible, but I just don't think in any kind of universe is it likely. All right, next question comes from Corey O. And Corey O writes, Dear John, love the show, watch it every day to hear the latest comic book movie news. My question is simple. Why isn't anyone making, or hasn't anyone made, a Legend of Zelda movie? There is some really awesome material they could work with, whether it be a CGI or a live action film. It's the classic story of a knight saving a princess from evil, and I think it would appeal to the audiences of all ages, from people who played the old classic NES version to the newer versions. What are your thoughts? Sincerely, the Blonde Ninja. Well, Corey, I have a feeling the reason early on we never saw a Zelda movie is because the technology wasn't there to make a good, visually faithful Zelda movie. But now we live in a different age. Now we live in an age where you can make really high-end effects and do all that kind of stuff that you would need for a movie like Zelda. The problem is, I don't think Zelda is as popular as it was 10 years ago. I don't think there are as many people playing Zelda games but at the same time, you're right. I mean, there's a nostalgia factor with Zelda. There's a remedy, like for me, it's kind of the same with Transformers. Not a lot of people watch Transformers anymore, even the new cartoons. I'm sorry to the fans who do watch it, but I'm sorry, most people on the planet don't watch it. But Transformers could still be a hit because of the nostalgia value and factor for guys like me, who I did watch it when I was a kid. I love that brand. I love Transformers, and so many of us do. And so could Zelda have that same kind of nostalgia factor to make it into a movie people would pay and go and watch? Maybe. I don't think it's a terrible idea. But why haven't they? I'm trying to speak for them, and obviously I can't, so I'm just throwing out a theory here. My theory as to why they haven't is because of what I mentioned before, that, Zelda is not as popular now as it used to be. But honestly, once again, if I was a studio exec, Zelda is a franchise I would look at. There's a huge nostalgia factor. People have been playing these games for decades. It's been around an awful long time. There's a lot of story there you can mine and use, and you can ignore the story if you want and kind of create your own story around it. I got a feeling at some point we'll see Zelda, maybe with a different name. Maybe people just don't like the name Zelda because it sounds kind of cheesy. But I could see them doing it at some point. Certainly if I was a studio exec, I would be looking at it for sure. Okay, the next question, and actually final question of the day, comes from Fred Griffiths. And Fred writes, love the show, and wondering if you have any insight into if Star Wars will have opening credits. Lucas was fined, just talking about George Lucas, was fined and had to resign from the Directors Guild because he refused to have opening credits in the Star Wars films. This is such an important part of the Star Wars movies, and I would be disappointed if Disney changes the beginning of the movies. Now, what Fred's talking about here is obviously we all know the iconic opening to Star Wars, right? You hear da 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 da, and then Star Wars appears, and then it goes off, fades, and you have the opening crawl instead of opening credits, which is a big departure from most movies. Now, at the time, George Lucas refused to put in opening credits because he wanted to start his movie the way he wanted to start it, and he had to resign the Directors Guild over it. I don't know what the rules are today, to be honest, with the Directors Guild or any other guild. I don't know what the rules are when it comes to opening credits. I don't know if it is required to have opening credits. But let's go on the assumption for a second. Maybe you guys, if you know the answer, you can put it in the comment section. Let's go on the assumption that the rules are still the same. I would really hope that Disney and Lucasfilm will keep the tradition of Star Wars movies with no opening credits. Start with the fanfare, start with the title, and start with the opening crawl. Now, I'm not completely against the idea that if that, after the opening crawl and the camera pans down from a sea of stars and goes to either a planet or a ship or whatever, that maybe then after all that happens, you can pop up a few credits here and there on the bottom of the screen. I'm not really opposed to that. That would be a compromise that I, as a movie fan, can live with. I just really hope we don't have like 45 seconds or a minute and a half of opening credits and then Star Wars in an opening crawl. That would just feel wrong to me. So I hope they keep it the way it is with no opening credits. But as a fan, I can live with it if they do have opening credits, but they just appear on the screen after the title and the opening crawl and the camera pans down from a sea of stars. If at that point you start popping in credits, as a compromise, and now, as movie fans, we're all about compromise, right? As a compromise, I can live with that personally as a fan. So I hope you feel the same way. Let me know what you think. Well, guys, that's all the mailbag questions that I had pulled and was ready to do today. So, look, thank you so much for joining me for this first installment of AMC Movie Bag. Once again, I need your input. Is this format, just this casual, sit back, lay back, talking movies format, is this something you're interested in? Is this something we should continue to do? Please give me your thoughts. Leave them in the comments section below or email us at amcmovietalk@gmail.com. And listen, if you want to get your question either on AMC Movie Talk or if you want it on AMC Movie Bag, email us at amcmovietalk@gmail.com. Email in your questions. We'll pick out a few every day for AMC Movie Talk, and we'll pull out a bunch more for AMC Mail Bag, and we'll hopefully get to your question and get it on air. So please let us know what you think of the show. Let me know what you thought about any or all the topics we talked about today, and make sure you keep on emailing in your questions. So thank you so much for joining us. And listen, while I've got you, before you do anything else, take a second and click the subscribe button. Become a subscriber to our AMC Movie News YouTube channel. It'll keep you up to date on all the relevant movie news and, of course, our daily AMC Movie Talk show and our AMC Mailbag show. So go ahead and click subscribe. Thanks a lot for joining us. Until next week, my name is John Campea for AMC Movie News, and until then, bye-bye.